Lysandra, listen to me now.
My lord, please!
You must not speak of this.
I am afraid.
The maid had barely finished scrubbing the grand staircase when the Duke grabbed her wrist and whispered, "From this moment on, you are my Duchess." She stared at him in horror. She was Lysandra Ashcombe, a forgotten servant with rough hands and worn shoes. He was Duke Alaric Ravenshire, one signature away from losing the largest estate in England. The Inheritance Council arrives before sunrise, he said, his voice low with urgency. If they discover I am unmarried, everything my family built will belong to my cousin. But I'm only a maid. Not anymore. Within a single night, servants were dressing her in silk, teaching her how to curtsy, how to smile like nobility, and how to hide every scar that proved she had spent her life below stairs. One mistake, one wrong word, one familiar face, and they would both be ruined. But what neither of them knew was that someone inside the manor already recognized the new Duchess, who was secretly waiting for the perfect moment to expose her. If you love historical Regency romance filled with secrets, forbidden love, shocking twists, and unforgettable betrayals, you're in the right place. Tell me in the comments, would you dare pretend to be a Duchess if your life depended on it? And don't forget to subscribe, because Chapter 1 reveals the dangerous bargain that changed Lysandra's life forever. Lysandra barely slept before dawn. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the Duke's face and heard the same impossible words. From this moment on, you are my Duchess. The silk gown hanging beside the bed looked like something stolen from another woman's life. It shimmered in the pale morning light while she stood barefoot on the cold floor, staring at it as though touching it would make everything real. A sharp knock broke the silence. 3 ladies entered without waiting for permission. None of them smiled. "The council will arrive before noon," the oldest said. "There is very little time." They washed her hands first. The older woman frowned as she rubbed scented oil over the rough skin. "These hands have carried buckets." Lysandra lowered her eyes. Yes, they must never know. They covered every scratch with fragrant cream until her skin looked softer than it had in years. Her hair, usually hidden beneath a servant's cap, was brushed until it fell like dark satin across her shoulders. Tiny pearl pins disappeared into the thick strands, while another woman tightened the laces of the expensive gown around her waist. She could hardly breathe. Perhaps that was the point. Duchesses, she thought bitterly, probably spent their entire lives pretending nothing hurt. The door opened again. Duke Alaric Ravenshire stepped inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He looked just as exhausted as she felt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the confidence everyone admired had been replaced by something quieter. Fear. Not fear for himself, fear of failing. He dismissed the women with a single glance. When they were alone, he walked around her slowly. His expression revealed nothing. "You've transformed. I still feel like a servant. You must stop thinking like one." She laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "Can someone forget 23 years overnight?" His silence answered for him. He handed her a small leather book. She opened it carefully. Inside were names, dates, family histories, portraits sketched in delicate ink. "The Ravenshire family tree," he said. "Every relative the council might mention." She looked at the endless pages. "I'll never remember all this." "You must." Her hands trembled. "I cannot become another person in a few hours." "You don't have to become another person." She looked up. "You only have to convince them that you already are." The words settled heavily between them. He noticed her frightened expression and looked away first. "This was never how I intended to save my family." "You had another choice?" "My cousin." The single word carried years of resentment. "Cedric Blackthorne has waited his entire life for me to fail." Lysandra had heard that name whispered among servants. Lord Cedric, the charming gentleman who smiled with his mouth but never with his eyes. He challenged father's will the day it was read, Alaric continued quietly. "The estate only passes to me if I am lawfully married before the Inheritance Council confirms succession." "And you are not?" "No." She closed the book. "So you chose me." His jaw tightened. "I chose the only person I believed would not betray me." She stared at him in disbelief. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He stepped closer. I know you returned a purse containing 50 sovereigns without taking a single coin. She blinked. I know you worked through a fever because another maid needed medicine for her child. Her throat tightened. I know every servant in this house trusts you. She had never imagined the Duke noticed any of those things. I watch more than people think. His voice softened. I needed someone honest. For the first time since everything began, she saw not the powerful Duke everyone feared, but a lonely man standing beneath the impossible weight of generations. Neither of them had chosen this morning. Both had simply run out of choices. A loud knock interrupted them. The butler entered quickly. "Your Grace." "What is it?" Lord Cedric arrived an hour earlier than expected. Silence filled the room. Alaric's face hardened instantly. So soon. He insists on greeting the new Duchess personally. Lysandra felt the blood drain from her face. He cannot. He already requested breakfast in the eastern drawing room. The butler hesitated. And he brought Lady Honoria Whitcomb. Alaric closed his eyes briefly. Of course he did. After the butler left, Lysandra looked at him. Who is she? The woman everyone expected me to marry. The words landed like stones. Does she know? No. Will she recognize that I am not noble? He answered honestly. If anyone can, it is Honoria. A maid hurried inside carrying a silver tray. Breakfast sat untouched between them. Lysandra could barely swallow a sip of tea. Her stomach twisted tighter with every passing minute. Another servant entered carrying gloves. Another brought jewelry. Another adjusted the hem of her gown. Everyone moved around her as though building a person who had never existed. None of them asked whether she wanted this life. Outside the tall windows, expensive carriages rolled into the courtyard one after another. The inheritance council, prominent families, old nobles, lawyers, witnesses. Every wheel that stopped outside sounded like another heartbeat counting down toward disaster. The elderly housekeeper entered quietly. Mrs. Weatherby had worked in Ravenshire Manor longer than anyone alive. She approached Lysandra slowly. Without warning, she reached into her apron and placed a tiny silver thimble into her palm. Lysandra frowned. My sewing thimble? Mrs. Weatherby nodded. You left it in the servants' hall. Lysandra smiled sadly. I suppose I won't need it anymore. The old woman gently closed her fingers around it. No. Her eyes filled with tears. But keep it anyway. Lysandra looked at the worn little object. It had belonged to her mother. She carried it everywhere, not because it was valuable, because it reminded her who she was. She slipped it carefully into a hidden pocket beneath her gown. No silk could erase where she came from. Mrs. Weatherby leaned closer. There is something you should know. Lysandra looked up. The staff believes in you. Her eyes widened. They know? We know enough. Mrs. Weatherby smiled faintly. And after everything you've done for us, not one servant in this house will betray you. Emotion rose inside Lysandra so suddenly she could not speak. For years she had believed she was invisible. Now the people she had served beside were risking everything to protect her. Mrs. Weatherby squeezed her hand. You have always treated people with dignity. She smiled through tears. Perhaps it is time someone treated you the same. Before Lysandra could answer, the great bell echoed through the manor. Once, twice, 3 times, the inheritance council had entered the estate. Every conversation stopped. Every servant straightened. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. Alaric offered his arm. His expression had become unreadable once again. From this point forward, he said quietly, every eye will be watching. Lysandra looked at the magnificent staircase she had scrubbed only yesterday. Today she would descend it as the Duchess of Ravenshire. One false step could destroy them both. She placed her trembling hand on his arm. The grand doors opened. Voices filled the entrance hall. Then, just before they started walking, a familiar voice drifted up from below, soft, calm, certain. I've waited a long time to meet the Duke's mysterious bride. Lysandra froze. She knew that voice. Someone from her past had just arrived. Lysandra's fingers tightened around the Duke's arm. The voice below was one she had prayed never to hear again. She slowly lifted her eyes toward the entrance hall. Standing among the elegantly dressed guests was a gentleman in a dark green coat. His posture was perfect, his smile warm enough to fool strangers, but she knew that smile better than anyone. Rowan Evermere, the former steward of the small estate where she had spent her childhood, the man who had watched her mother work herself to death without lifting a finger to help, the man who had looked at a frightened little girl and told her that servants were born to suffer. Years had changed his clothes, not his eyes. His gaze settled on her for only a heartbeat before moving away. There was no sign that he recognized her. Not yet. Alaric noticed the colour drain from her face. "What is it?" She forced herself to breathe. "I know one of your guests." "Which one?" "The gentleman in green." Alaric followed her eyes. "Rowan Evermere. You know him? He advises the Inheritance Council." Her heart nearly stopped. Of all the people in England, it had to be him. The butler announced their arrival. His Grace, Duke Alaric Ravenshire, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Ravenshire. Every conversation died. Dozens of faces turned toward the staircase. Lysandra felt as though the entire manor had become silent just to hear her heartbeat. She remembered every lesson from the morning. Walk slowly. Do not look down. Smile gently. Never rush. She descended beside Alaric one careful step at a time. The expensive gown felt heavier with each movement. When they reached the marble floor, polite applause echoed through the hall. Ladies curtsied. Gentlemen bowed. Lysandra returned every greeting exactly as she had been taught. She almost believed she could survive this. Then Lady Honoria Whitcomb stepped forward. She was breathtaking, tall, elegant, with silver blonde hair arranged beneath a delicate bonnet. Her confidence filled the room before she spoke. "So this is your bride." Her smile was graceful. Her eyes were not. Alaric inclined his head. "Lady Honoria, you married without informing anyone." "It happened rather suddenly. I can see that." She turned toward Lysandra. "It is an honor to meet you, Your Grace." Lysandra curtsied. "The honor is mine." Honoria studied her carefully. Not her dress, not her jewels, her face, as though searching for a memory she could not quite reach. "You have an unusual accent." Lysandra's stomach tightened. "My mother came from the north." A charming answer. Before another question could follow, Rowan Evermere approached. He bowed politely. "Your Grace." Alaric greeted him with practiced calm. "Mr. Evermere, what a pleasant surprise your marriage has been." His eyes moved to Lysandra. "And congratulations, Duchess." For one terrifying second their eyes locked. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, recognition, then it disappeared. Lysandra forced herself to smile. "Thank you." He kissed the back of her gloved hand. His fingers paused for the smallest moment. Then he stepped away. Nothing had happened. No one else noticed. But she had. He was thinking, trying to remember. The council gathered inside the grand drawing room. Ancient portraits watched from the walls, while servants poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. The chairman unfolded a thick leather document. Duke Alaric Ravenshire. Alaric stood. "You understand today's proceedings." "I do. The will of the late Duke states that inheritance depends upon lawful marriage." "It does. We therefore request proof." A silence settled over the room. One of the lawyers produced a folded certificate. The chairman examined it carefully. "The marriage was conducted yesterday evening." "Correct." "The witnesses?" Alaric named 2 elderly clergymen. Real men, real signatures. Everything appeared flawless. The chairman nodded slowly. "The documents appear legitimate." Lysandra almost released the breath she had been holding. Then Rowan spoke. "If I may." Every head turned toward him. "I merely have one small question." The chairman gestured for him to continue. Rowan smiled pleasantly. "Your Grace." He looked directly at Lysandra. "Where did you and the Duke first meet?" The room became unbearably quiet. Alaric answered before she could. "During a charitable event." Rowan never looked away from her. "I asked the Duchess." Lysandra's thoughts raced. The Duke had never prepared her for this. She chose the safest answer she could imagine. "At Ravenshire House." "When?" She hesitated. "A year ago." Rowan tilted his head slightly. "Interesting." Her pulse thundered. "Why?" "Because his Grace was abroad a year ago." The words struck like lightning. No one spoke. Lysandra's mouth went dry. She had fallen into a trap. Alaric remained perfectly composed. "My advisor has mistaken the date." "I have. We met shortly after my return." He looked calmly at Rowan. "My wife has endured weeks of wedding preparations." He reached gently for Lysandra's hand. I imagine exhaustion has blurred a few memories. Soft laughter spread through the room. The tension eased. Only Rowan remained silent. His smile never returned. He believed neither of them. The meeting continued, but Lysandra could feel his eyes finding her again and again. By the time luncheon was announced, she could barely think. As guests moved toward the dining hall, Alaric quietly led her into a nearby library. The doors closed behind them. She immediately stepped away. I almost ruined everything. You recovered. No. Her voice shook. You saved me. She pressed both hands against her face. I cannot do this. He waited. I have spent my whole life trying not to be noticed. She looked at him with frightened eyes. Now every word I speak could destroy your family. He walked toward the fireplace. I should have prepared you better. You prepared me as much as anyone could. She swallowed hard. I lied to people who have done nothing to me. He turned. If you leave now, she finished the sentence. You lose everything. He nodded once. She looked around the library. Shelves filled with centuries of history surrounded them. Portraits of proud ancestors stared down from above. Their eyes seemed to judge her. She did not belong here, not among these people, not wearing another woman's title. She reached into the hidden pocket beneath her gown. Her fingers touched the tiny silver thimble. The worn metal steadied her. She remembered her mother's voice. Do the next right thing. Always, even when no one is watching. She closed her hand around it. Then she looked at Alaric. I made you a promise. His expression softened. I will keep it. Before he could answer, someone knocked urgently. The butler entered, visibly shaken. Your Grace, what happened? A stable boy has been injured. Alaric frowned. How? He says one of Lord Cedric's men pushed him. What? The boy claims he overheard a conversation. Silence filled the room. Alaric stepped closer. What conversation? He heard Lord Cedric tell Mr. Evermere that the Duchess would expose herself before sunset. Lysandra felt the room spin. They know. The butler continued. The boy also heard another name. What name? He heard them mention. Ashcroft House. Lysandra froze. Her breathing stopped. Ashcroft House. No one at Ravenshire knew that name. It was the estate where she had been born, the place she had fled after her mother's death. Alaric immediately noticed her reaction. You know it. She nodded slowly. It was my home. The Duke's eyes narrowed. You never told me. I never thought it mattered. The butler looked confused. There is more. Alaric gestured impatiently. Speak. The stable boy said, Lord Cedric believes the Duchess is not who she claims to be. Lysandra whispered the words before anyone else could. Because he knows who I really am. The silence that followed was heavier than anything either of them had faced that day. Alaric looked directly into her eyes. Tell me everything. She wanted to. She truly did. But memories she had buried for years began rising all at once. Her mother's frightened face. A locked room, a letter hidden beneath loose floorboards, a man shouting that no child must ever be found. She had spent years convincing herself those memories belonged to a frightened little girl. Now Cedric and Rowan had somehow found the trail she thought had vanished forever. A cold realization settled over her. This was no longer only about a false marriage. Someone had been searching for her long before the Duke ever asked her to become his Duchess, and whoever had finally found her was willing to destroy an entire family just to uncover the truth. Alaric did not ask another question. He simply opened the library door and looked toward the corridor. Send for Captain Oswin. The butler hurried away without a word. Lysandra remained where she stood, unable to steady her breathing. Every memory she had buried seemed determined to return at once. She had spent years believing she had escaped Ashcroft House forever. She had changed villages, changed employers, and hidden her past behind endless days of hard work. Yet somehow it had found her. Alaric closed the door again. Sit. I'm not afraid of standing. I know. His voice softened. But you're shaking. Only then did she notice her hands. They trembled so badly she had to clasp them together. I should leave. No, this deception is already falling apart. No, you don't understand. I understand enough. She looked into his eyes. If Cedric truly knows my past, he will not stop until he destroys both of us. Then we'll stop him first. The certainty in his voice caught her off guard. No hesitation, no doubt, only determination. A knock came at the door. A broad-shouldered man entered, wearing the dark uniform of the Ravenshire Guard. Captain Oswin Harcourt bowed briefly. "You sent for me, Your Grace." Alaric nodded. "From this moment, the Duchess does not move anywhere inside or outside this estate without your protection." Oswin looked at Lysandra. His expression held neither curiosity nor judgment. "It will be done. And double the guards around every entrance, immediately." When the captain left, Alaric turned back to her. "You're no longer pretending to be the Duchess only for my inheritance." She frowned. "What do you mean? You've become the target of something much older." His words settled heavily between them. Neither of them knew how old. Neither of them knew how dangerous. The luncheon bell echoed through the manor. Guests expected the Duke and Duchess. There was no choice except to return. As they entered the dining hall, conversation slowed. Long tables glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Silver dishes covered with polished lids filled the room with the scent of roasted pheasant and fresh bread. Every chair was occupied except two, the seats at the head of the table, the Duke's, the Duchess's. Lysandra felt dozens of eyes follow her. She remembered Mrs. Weatherby's words, "Walk with dignity." She lifted her chin, one step, then another. By the time she reached her chair, she had almost forgotten she had once polished its legs on her knees. The meal began. Gentle conversation floated through the room. Politics, harvests, the London season. No one mentioned inheritance. No one mentioned marriage. Yet beneath every polite smile, she sensed questions. Lord Cedric raised his glass. "To unexpected blessings." The guests echoed the toast. His eyes remained fixed on Lysandra. She returned the look without lowering hers. For the first time in years, she refused to shrink beneath someone else's stare. Cedric smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for that. Halfway through the meal, Lady Honoria leaned closer. "Your Grace." "Yes? I've been wondering." Lysandra remained calm. "You have remarkably little interest in discussing noble society. I prefer listening. Most duchesses enjoy speaking. I've never believed the loudest voice is the wisest." Several ladies nearby exchanged approving smiles. Even Lady Honoria seemed surprised. "Perhaps," she admitted, "it is refreshing." For the first time that day, Lysandra realized something. She did not need to imitate every noblewoman. She only needed to be herself, respectful, observant, honest. Those qualities had carried her through every difficult year of her life. Perhaps they could carry her through this one. Across the table, Alaric noticed the change. The fear in her eyes had not disappeared, but courage had quietly begun replacing panic. After luncheon, the guests spread through the gardens, musicians played beneath flowering trees while servants carried trays of tea and cakes. Lysandra walked beside Alaric through the rose paths. Captain Oswin remained only a few steps behind. "You handled yourself well," Alaric said. "I nearly fainted twice." "You hid it." She smiled weakly. "I suppose that's progress." He looked at her. "It is." They reached an old stone fountain. Its water had flowed through Ravenshire for generations. Lysandra rested one hand against the cool marble. "I keep wondering why." "Why what?" "Why someone would search for me after all these years." Alaric did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked quietly, "What happened at Ashcroft House?" She stared into the water. "My mother worked there." "As what?" "A seamstress." "And your father?" "I never knew him." She swallowed hard. "My mother refused to speak his name." "Did anyone else?" "There were whispers." "What kind?" She closed her eyes. "They used to say I looked too much like someone who lived upstairs." Alaric's expression changed. "You mean, I don't know what they meant." Before she could continue, Captain Oswin stepped forward. "Your Grace." Alaric turned. "What is it?" "A rider has arrived." "For whom?" "He says he carries a private letter for the Duchess." Lysandra froze. "I don't know anyone who would write to me." Oswin handed over a sealed envelope. There was no name, only a small silver crest pressed into the wax. The sight of it made her knees weaken. She knew that crest, a soaring hawk above an oak tree. Ashcroft. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside lay a single sheet, only one sentence. You should have stayed hidden. No signature, no explanation, only those 5 words. A cold wind swept through the garden. Alaric read the note over her shoulder. His face darkened. Who delivered this? Captain Oswin looked furious. The messenger disappeared before my men reached the gate. Alaric crushed the letter in his hand. This is no coincidence. Lysandra nodded. They know exactly where I am. That evening, the manor became a fortress. Extra guards patrolled every corridor. Doors were locked. Windows checked twice. Even the servants whispered instead of speaking normally. Mrs. Weatherby found Lysandra standing alone beside the nursery wing. You haven't eaten. I'm not hungry. You must keep your strength. Lysandra smiled sadly. I've spent my whole life surviving. The elderly woman gently touched her shoulder. Surviving and living are not the same. Those words lingered long after Mrs. Weatherby walked away. Perhaps she was right. Lysandra had survived hunger, cold, cruel employers, loneliness, but she had never truly lived, not once. As darkness settled over Ravenshire Manor, Alaric sat alone in his father's study. Maps covered the desk. Old family records lay open. Something refused to leave his thoughts. Ashcroft House. He searched through dusty ledgers until he found a faded document nearly 30 years old. His heartbeat slowed. Ashcroft had once shared a legal partnership with the Ravenshire family. The agreement ended suddenly. No reason was recorded. Only one sentence had been added beneath it. All remaining correspondence sealed by order of both families. Alaric frowned. Why would 2 powerful houses erase their history together? Someone knocked. Oswin entered. I questioned the stable boy again. And? He remembered one more thing. Alaric stood. What? He heard Cedric tell Rowan that the girl carries the last piece. The last piece of what? He didn't know. Oswin hesitated, but he also heard Rowan answer. What did he say? He said once the truth comes out, neither Ravenshire nor Ashcroft will survive it. Silence settled over the study. Alaric slowly looked toward the dark window. This was never about an inheritance. It was never about a marriage. Somewhere in the past, 2 great families had buried a secret so dangerous that powerful men were willing to destroy innocent lives to keep it hidden. And without realizing it, he and Lysandra had already stepped into the center of it. The first scream shattered the silence just before dawn. Lysandra sat upright in bed before she was fully awake. Another scream echoed through the manor. Then came the sound of running footsteps. Someone pounded against her door. Your Grace, Captain Oswin's voice. She rushed to open it. His face was pale. Stay behind me. What happened? The West Wing is on fire. A blast of heat rolled through the corridor before he finished speaking. Smoke curled beneath the ceiling. Servants hurried past carrying buckets while others struggled to calm frightened guests pouring from their rooms. Lysandra's heart raced. The guests, they're being evacuated. And the Duke. Oswin looked toward the smoke. He was already inside. Without thinking, she ran. Your Grace. Oswin reached for her arm. She pulled free. I won't leave him. She had spent years following orders. Today, she ignored every one of them. The smoke thickened with every step. Paintings crashed from burning walls. Timbers groaned overhead. She wrapped part of her sleeve across her mouth and pushed deeper into the west wing. Alaric? No answer, only crackling flames. A servant stumbled toward her, coughing violently. The library. He collapsed before finishing. Lysandra froze. The library. The old family records. Alaric. She forced herself forward. The heat burned her skin. When she reached the library doors, one had already fallen from its hinges. Inside, flames climbed towering bookshelves. Ancient records disappeared into black ash. At the center of the room, Alaric struggled beneath a fallen beam. He had protected a large wooden chest with his own body. Leave it, she shouted. It matters. It will kill you. He tried lifting the beam again. It refused to move. Lysandra ignored the pain in her hands as she threw herself beside him. Together they pushed. The beam shifted only slightly. Smoke filled her lungs. Her vision blurred. Again, she gasped. Alaric looked at her. You should have escaped. So should you. They pushed once more. The beam rolled just enough. Alaric dragged himself free. The ceiling cracked above them. He grabbed the heavy chest. Run! They barely crossed the doorway before the roof collapsed behind them. The library vanished beneath roaring flames. Outside, servants rushed toward them. Oswin caught Lysandra before she fell. You could have died. She looked back at the burning wing. So could he. The fire burned for hours. By sunrise, half the west wing had been destroyed. Guests gathered in the front courtyard wrapped in blankets. Lord Cedric stood among them, looking almost disappointed that everyone had survived. Alaric noticed. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Neither man smiled. The local magistrate arrived before noon. He examined the ruins carefully. There was oil. Alaric frowned. What? The fire was started deliberately. The words spread through the crowd like another blaze. Murmurs filled the air. Someone had tried to destroy Ravenshire Manor. Someone had nearly killed everyone inside. Cedric stepped forward. How terrible. His sympathy sounded rehearsed. The magistrate continued. The fire began inside the library. Lysandra felt cold. The library. The room containing generations of Ravenshire history. Not the kitchens. Not the servants' quarters. Someone had wanted those records destroyed. Alaric slowly opened the chest he had carried from the flames. Inside lay dozens of old journals, sealed documents, and one carved wooden box. Everything else in the library had burned. Only this chest survived. Cedric watched it closely, far too closely. Lysandra noticed. So did Alaric. That evening, after every guest had retired, Alaric carried the rescued chest into his father's private study. Only 4 people entered. Alaric, Lysandra, Captain Oswin, Mrs. Weatherby. The elderly housekeeper quietly locked the door. No interruptions. Alaric nodded. He lifted the carved wooden box from the chest. It was old, very old. The Ravenshire crest covered its lid. A small brass key rested beneath a folded ribbon. Lysandra stared at it. I've seen that key before. Everyone looked at her. Where? She closed her eyes. My mother. You remember? She wore one around her neck. Her breathing quickened. I asked what it opened, and, she said, Lysandra's voice became almost a whisper. One day, it will decide whether people live or die. Silence settled over the room. Alaric inserted the key. The lock clicked. Inside rested several faded letters tied together with blue ribbon. Beneath them lay an old portrait. Lysandra picked it up carefully. The woman in the painting looked astonishingly familiar. Dark hair, grey eyes, the same gentle smile her mother once carried. She turned the portrait over. One sentence had been written on the back. Lady Eleanor Ashcroft. Lysandra's hands began trembling. My mother. Alaric looked at her. Your mother was a lady? She nodded slowly. I never knew. Mrs. Weatherby's eyes filled with shock. But you said she worked as a seamstress. She did. Why? I don't know. Alaric opened the first letter. His face changed immediately. What is it? He handed it to Lysandra. She read aloud. To my beloved Eleanor. If anything happens to me, take our daughter and disappear. Never tell anyone who her father is. If Cedric's family discovers the truth, neither of you will survive. Her voice broke. Our daughter. The room became painfully quiet. Alaric took the letter. The signature had almost faded. Only one name remained clear. Edmund Ravenshire. Lysandra looked at him in disbelief. Ravenshire. Alaric stared at the signature. My father. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Then the impossible truth settled over them. Lysandra was not simply a maid, she carried Ravenshire blood. She had been hidden her entire life. The inheritance, the marriage, the search. Everything suddenly made sense. A loud crash exploded downstairs. Captain Oswin drew his sword instantly. Someone was inside the manor. Footsteps echoed through the corridors. Fast, purposeful. The study door burst open. A wounded guard stumbled inside before collapsing. They're here. Blood covered his uniform. They've broken through the eastern entrance. Oswin rushed toward the corridor. Protect the Duke. Alaric grabbed a pistol from the wall cabinet. Mrs. Weatherby hurried Lysandra toward a hidden passage behind the bookshelf. Come. Lysandra refused. No, you must. They came because of me. They came for all of us. Another gunshot echoed downstairs, then another. Servants screamed. Glass shattered. The manor had become a battlefield. Oswin returned moments later. There are at least 20 men. Led by Cedric? No. Who then? Before Oswin could answer, slow applause echoed from the hallway. Cedric Blackthorne stepped into the doorway, perfectly dressed, perfectly calm. Several armed men surrounded him. Smoke drifted behind them. Cedric smiled. "I've searched for you for 23 years. His eyes rested on Lysandra. "You've made this much harder than necessary." Alaric raised the pistol. "One more step." Cedric ignored him. "You still don't understand, do you?" "No, the girl was never meant to inherit anything." Lysandra stepped forward. "Then why hunt me?" Cedric laughed quietly. "Because your existence proves my grandfather murdered his own brother." Silence swallowed the room. Cedric's smile disappeared. "My family stole everything from yours." He looked at Alaric. "Your father discovered the truth." His voice grew colder. "So we buried it." Lysandra felt the walls closing around her. "My mother knew. She knew enough to run." Cedric's face hardened. "But she refused to tell us where you were. You killed her. I simply finished what my grandfather started." The confession struck Lysandra harder than any blow. Every lonely year, every unanswered question, every tear she had shed over her mother's grave. This man had destroyed it all. Something inside her changed forever. The frightened servant disappeared. The frightened false Duchess disappeared. She looked Cedric directly in the eyes. For the first time she felt no fear, only clarity. "If you want the truth erased," her voice remained steady, "you'll have to kill me yourself." Cedric slowly drew his pistol. "I was always planning to." Alaric immediately stepped in front of her. "No." She gently touched his arm, then she moved around him. This was no longer his battle. It was hers. She remembered every lesson life had forced upon her, every cruel word, every hungry night, every time someone had convinced her she was worth less because she had lived below stairs. "No more." She lifted her chin. "I know exactly who I am now." Cedric aimed the pistol at her heart. "So do I." His finger tightened on the trigger. The room fell completely silent. No one breathed. No one moved. One heartbeat later, a deafening gunshot tore through the study. The gunshot echoed through the study like thunder. Lysandra closed her eyes. She expected pain. Instead, she heard another shot, then another. When she opened her eyes, Alaric was standing in front of her, one hand still holding his pistol. Captain Oswin had thrown himself between Cedric's men and the doorway. Two attackers lay on the floor. Smoke filled the room. Cedric had missed. His bullet had buried itself in the wall where Lysandra had stood only a heartbeat before. "Take her!" Cedric shouted. His men surged forward. Steel clashed against steel. Oswin met the first attacker with a powerful strike that sent him crashing into a bookshelf. Another lunged from the side, but Alaric fired again, forcing him backward. The study became chaos. Splintered wood flew through the air. Glass shattered beneath heavy boots. Mrs. Weatherby pulled the wounded guard behind an overturned desk while trying to stop the bleeding with trembling hands. Lysandra stood frozen for only a second. Then she saw one of Cedric's men slipping toward Alaric from behind. Without thinking, she grabbed the brass candle holder from the desk and swung it with every ounce of strength she had. The heavy metal struck the man across the temple. He collapsed without another sound. Alaric looked back at her in surprise. "You should have hidden." She met his eyes. "I've hidden my whole life." Another man rushed at her. She stepped aside just as he reached her, sending him crashing into the fireplace. Captain Oswin quickly finished the fight. More guards flooded into the corridor. The sound of boots thundered through the manor. Cedric realized the balance had changed. "Fall back!" His men retreated toward the hall. Alaric chased after him. Lysandra followed, despite Oswin calling her name. She could not stop now, not when the truth had finally come into the light. They burst into the grand entrance hall. Guests who had remained inside screamed and scattered as swords flashed beneath the crystal chandeliers. Cedric ran toward the front doors. Outside, rain poured across the courtyard. Lightning split the dark sky. Waiting horses stamped nervously against the stone. Cedric mounted one in a single motion. Alaric reached him just as the horse reared. The Duke grabbed the reins. Cedric leaped down, drawing his sword. "So this is how Ravenshire ends." Alaric unsheathed his own blade. "No." Their swords collided. The sound rang across the courtyard. Cedric attacked with fury born from years of hatred. Alaric answered with calm precision. Each strike drove sparks through the rain. Lysandra watched helplessly. She wanted to run toward him. She wanted to help, but Oswin held her back. "You'll only distract him." She hated that he was right. Cedric fought like a desperate man with nothing left to lose. He lunged again. Alaric parried, their blades locked, faces inches apart. Cedric smiled. "You think you've won. I know enough. You know nothing." With a sudden twist, Cedric broke free and kicked Alaric hard in the chest. The Duke stumbled backward down the wet stone steps. His sword slid from his hand. Cedric raised his own weapon. This family should have died decades ago. He charged. Lysandra tore herself free from Oswin. Alaric. Without thinking, she ran between them. Cedric froze for the smallest fraction of a second. It was enough. Alaric tackled him to the ground. Both men rolled across the rain-soaked courtyard. Cedric's sword skidded away. The two struggled fiercely. Punches, elbows, mud, blood. Years of anger poured into every movement. Cedric reached inside his coat. A small pistol. Lysandra saw it first. "He's armed!" Alaric turned just as Cedric pulled the trigger. The shot exploded. Captain Oswin threw himself forward. The bullet struck his shoulder instead. He crashed heavily onto the stones. "No!" Lysandra cried. Guards rushed toward Cedric. This time there was nowhere left to run. They forced him to his knees. His hands were bound behind his back. Rain washed blood from his face. Still he laughed. "You've captured one man." He looked directly at Lysandra. "But you cannot bury the truth forever." She stepped toward him. "We're done burying it." For the first time since she had known his name, Cedric had no answer. The magistrate arrived moments later with additional officers from the nearby town. He listened carefully as the rescued letters were placed before him. Each page was examined, each seal confirmed. The confession, the forged records, the murders, the years of deception, every lie collapsed beneath the weight of the evidence. The magistrate slowly looked at Cedric. "You stand accused of murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, arson, and treason against the crown." Cedric lowered his head. His smile finally disappeared. As soldiers led him away, he looked over one shoulder. "Your mother should have told you." Lysandra's voice remained steady. "She protected me." "No," he smiled bitterly. "She protected the name Ravenshire." Then he disappeared into the rain. Silence settled across the courtyard. It was over. The storm continued, but something inside the manor had changed. The fear that had ruled every room was gone. Captain Oswin was carried inside. The physician worked through the night to remove the bullet. Lysandra refused to leave the room until he opened his eyes again. When he finally woke, he smiled weakly. "I failed to keep you out of danger." Tears filled her eyes. "You saved all of us." He laughed quietly despite the pain. "I've served this family for 30 years. He looked at Alaric. "I couldn't stop today." Alaric clasped his hand. "And I will never forget it." Days passed. Investigators searched every corner of Ravenshire and Ashcroft. Hidden ledgers were recovered. Witnesses came forward. Former servants who had lived in silence for decades finally spoke. One elderly priest arrived, carrying another sealed document. He had hidden it since the night Eleanor Ashcroft disappeared. The document confirmed everything. Lysandra had been born the legitimate daughter of Edmund Ravenshire and Lady Eleanor Ashcroft. No scandal, no shame, only a love that powerful people had tried to erase. When the investigation ended, the Inheritance Council gathered once more. This time the atmosphere felt entirely different. The chairman rose slowly. "Your Grace," he looked at Alaric, "the estate is lawfully yours." Then he turned toward Lysandra, and Lady Lysandra Ravenshire, the name caught in her heart. "We owe you an apology." She remained silent. "We judged you before we knew the truth." The room stood together. One by one, every member of the council bowed, not to a false duchess, not to a servant. To the woman who had risked everything to protect a family that she never knew was her own. Later that evening, the manor finally became quiet. The rain had stopped. The gardens glistened beneath the setting sun. Lysandra stood beside the old fountain, where she had once received the threatening letter. Everything felt different. Alaric joined her without speaking. For a while, they simply watched the water. "I've been thinking," he said. She smiled faintly. "That usually means trouble." He laughed for the first time in many days. "It usually does." His smile faded again. "I asked you to become my Duchess because I was desperate." "I know. I never asked what it would cost you." She looked down. "It cost me the life I thought I understood." He nodded. "And it nearly cost you your life." Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally he faced her. "When this began, I believed duty mattered more than anything. And now? I was wrong." She searched his face. "There is something I need to tell you." He stepped closer. "I married you for an estate." His voice shook. "But somewhere between the lies, the danger, and every moment you refused to abandon me," he paused, "I fell in love with you." The words hung gently between them. Lysandra felt tears rise before she could stop them. "I tried not to." She laughed softly through those tears. "It would have been much simpler." "Did you fail?" She looked into the eyes of the man who had first seen honesty where everyone else had only seen a maid, the man who had stood between her and a bullet, the man who had chosen trust before knowing her blood. "I failed completely." He reached for her hand. This time she did not hesitate. She placed it in his. No bargain remained between them, no deception, no duty, only two people who had walked through fire together and emerged, changed forever. As the last light settled over Ravenshire Manor, Alaric rested his forehead gently against hers. The estate had been saved, the truth had survived, the enemies were gone, and the love that had begun as the greatest lie of their lives had become the only thing either of them never wanted to lose. Spring arrived gently at Ravenshire Manor. The blackened stones of the west wing had been replaced one by one. New windows reflected the morning sun. Fresh ivy climbed the repaired walls as though the estate itself had decided to begin again. The manor no longer felt like a place guarded by secrets. Laughter returned to the servants' hall. Children of the workers played freely in the gardens without fear of being chased away. The heavy silence that had haunted every corridor disappeared with the men who had built their power on lies. Lysandra walked through the manor before sunrise, just as she had done when she was still a maid. The difference was no longer in where she walked. It was in how people looked at her. No one lowered their eyes out of fear. No one bowed because they had to. They smiled because they wanted to. She stopped outside the servants' kitchen. Old habits made her reach for the basket of fresh bread waiting to be carried inside. A young maid hurried toward her. "Your Grace, please." Lysandra smiled. "I carried bread for years. You don't have to anymore." "I know." She lifted the basket anyway. "But I still can." The girl laughed. Word spread quickly through the manor. Their Duchess had carried breakfast into the servants' dining room herself. Some of the older servants wiped away quiet tears. Nothing about her title had changed her heart. Mrs. Weatherby watched from the doorway with pride shining in her tired eyes. "I always knew." Lysandra looked over. "Knew what?" "That kindness belongs to the person, not the position." Later that morning, builders gathered in the courtyard. Alaric stood beside rolled maps spread across a large table. "The west wing will be rebuilt." The foreman nodded. "Exactly as before?" Alaric looked toward Lysandra. She stepped closer. "No." Every eye turned to her. The library should return. She rested one hand on the old plans, but not only for noble families. The builders listened carefully. "I want every child working on this estate to learn to read." The foreman blinked. "The servants' children?" "Every one of them," she smiled. "And every servant who wishes they had learned years ago." A long silence followed. Then one of the elderly gardeners quietly removed his cap. "My Duchess," his voice shook. "I am 68 years old." She looked at him warmly. "It is never too late." He smiled through tears. "I've always wanted to read my wife's letters myself." Lysandra reached for his weathered hand. "Then that is exactly where we'll begin. Within weeks, One room of the rebuilt library became a small school. Children sat beside stable hands. Housemaids learned beside gardeners. No one was turned away. The estate slowly became known across the county for something far greater than its wealth. It became known for hope. One afternoon, Lady Honoria arrived unannounced. Lysandra welcomed her into the drawing room. For a moment neither woman spoke. Finally Honoria smiled. "I owe you an apology. You owe me nothing. I judged you before I knew you." She looked around the room. "I thought I had lost a duke." She laughed softly. "It turns out I had simply misunderstood the kind of woman he truly needed." Lysandra reached across the table. "There is nothing to forgive." Honoria smiled. "I hope one day we become friends. I would like that." When she left, there was no bitterness between them, only respect. Captain Oswin slowly recovered from his wound. The scar across his shoulder remained, but he wore it proudly. Alaric offered him retirement with a generous pension. The captain refused. "I've protected this family too long." He smiled. "I'd be terribly bored doing anything else." Mrs. Weatherby finally agreed to train a younger housekeeper, though she still inspected every room herself. The manor would collapse without me. Everyone knew she was only half joking. One quiet evening, Lysandra stood inside the rebuilt library. The shelves were once again filled with books. Sunlight poured through the tall windows. She found herself standing in the exact place where flames had nearly taken everything. Life had a strange way of returning. She reached into her pocket. The tiny silver thimble was still there. The metal had become smooth after years of being held in frightened hands. She placed it carefully inside a glass cabinet beside the portrait of her mother, Lady Eleanor Ashcroft Ravenshire. "Not hidden, not forgotten," she whispered softly. "We came home." A quiet voice answered behind her. "You kept your promise." She turned. Alaric stood in the doorway. "You heard me. I heard enough." He walked beside her. Together they looked at Eleanor's portrait. "I wish my father had been brave enough to tell the truth while he lived." Lysandra nodded. "So do I, but perhaps." She looked around the library filled with children reading below. "If he had, none of these lives would have changed." Alaric smiled. "You always find hope where others find regret. I learned that from my mother." He took her hand. "And you've taught it to me." Months later, the crown formally confirmed Lysandra's place within the Ravenshire family. The ceremony was simple. She wore no extravagant jewels, only the pearl pins placed in her hair on the first morning she had been forced to become a duchess. This time they felt different. They no longer belonged to a disguise. They belonged to her. When the ceremony ended, the people waiting outside did something she never expected. The servants applauded first, then the townspeople, then the council. Not because she carried a title, because she had earned their trust. Years passed. Stories about the Maid Duchess spread across England. Some people believed they were exaggerated. Others insisted every word was true. No version ever fully captured what had really happened. Only those who had lived through the fear understood the price of that happy ending. One autumn afternoon, while helping children organize books, a courier arrived from London. He carried a sealed envelope bearing the royal crest. Alaric broke the seal. His smile slowly disappeared. Lysandra noticed immediately. "What is it?" He handed her the letter. She read carefully. The Crown had reopened several investigations into old noble families connected to Ashcroft and Blackthorn. New evidence had been discovered. Several names mentioned in the recovered letters were still alive. One sentence stood alone at the bottom of the page. "One surviving witness has finally agreed to speak." Lysandra looked up. "I thought it was over." So did I. The wind outside lifted the pages resting on a nearby table. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The past had already stolen enough from them, but perhaps one final truth still waited to be uncovered. Lysandra folded the letter carefully. This time she did not feel fear. Whatever came next, she would face it as herself, not as a frightened servant, not as a false duchess, but as a woman who had discovered that true nobility is not written in blood, wealth, or titles. It is revealed by the choices we make when everything we love is at risk. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments what moved you the most. Was it Lysandra's courage, Alaric's sacrifice, or the truth that kindness can outlive relive generations of lies. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because every story becomes even more meaningful when we share it together. And if you believe that ordinary people can rise above impossible circumstances, and that love, truth, and courage are always worth fighting for, please subscribe to the channel and join me for the next unforgettable journey. Your support means more than you know, and I can't wait to share the next story with you.